were universal and singular. He did not believe in a God and ultimately despaired of hope and committed suicide. The only thing he had was the moral standard. And that's a sad thing to have, because it just tells you time and time again how you fail to be who you should be. Okay? So sad end, because he didn't grasp that there is a God, and especially the triune God who saves us, that type of things. But these are truths. You know, he was right about this moral development. And I won't bore you with that. He was developing further steps. Piaget was another psychologist who focused on education. He had 4 steps, I think. Kohlberg had 6. So we were looking at the standards. So avoid pain, meet your needs, conformity, law and order, social contracts, or a universal moral standard. So then we were looking at some of these examples, and I can't remember exactly where we were, but we'll pick up 4. So, statement made by 2 German stormtroopers during the Nazi occupation of Holland in 1941. I cannot tell a lie. The Jews are under the table. Okay, so presented there, or the stormtroopers knock on the door, come on in, and the father says, I can't tell a lie, the Jews are under the table. Okay? That would be 4. So that is law and order. I'm going to obey the law. Okay? So let's move on to 5. I have a constitutional right to free speech here on campus. What moral development is that? What stage? Do you need them in front of you? I should be able to go back at a page at a time. So what would that be? I have a constitutional right for free speech here on campus. I don't believe it's 6. You're thinking 4? I can't remember the answer I put there. I think I would say 5, a social contract. I have a constitutional. But let's see. Oh, good. I got it right. Okay. So social contract, constitutional. 6, in China, the Christians are wearing yellow jackets to identify themselves and are willing to help anyone they can. What's that? I don't think so. Because, what's that? 6, yeah. That's a 6. 7, it's wrong to heal on the Sabbath. So that was the argument of the Pharisees, right? It's wrong to heal on the Sabbath. 4? Yep, 4. That's law and order. And that was the most that the Pharisees elevated to. And if you look at Jesus' reasoning with regards to Sabbath laws and so forth, it's all at a moral level of 6. He's 3 pieces of silver if you lead us to Jesus. What would that be? Avoid pain, do what feels good. 5, social contract. Pastor Mellon's saying 2, and I think that's what I would choose too. So doing what feels good. You give me 30 pieces of silver, or we'll give you 30 pieces of silver. You lead us to Jesus. 9, in the movie Schindler's List, Mr. Schindler hired people to work in his factory in order to protect their lives. That's a good movie if you haven't seen it, by the way. Six. Yeah. Yeah. So there's six, just to protect their lives. There's the law of love. It wasn't that they were good at their work, anything like that. But what would people think if we did what you say? That would be conformity, so that's 3. I think I got 2 more. After the resurrection, the disciples preached Christ without fear of death because they knew they would rise from the dead just as Jesus had done. That would be a 6 too. Oh, yep, 12. Oh, I haven't even read the question yet. Okay, so I was so tired of him, I just had to get out of the marriage. So I'm going to do what feels good. Okay, get out of the marriage too. Oh, I thought I had 12. Okay, this is a baker's dozen. My husband made big money while we were married. When I divorced him, I got half of everything he had made. One, not avoiding pain, I would probably say 2. Yeah. Doing what feels good. I don't have to worry about him anymore. Human life is more important than property, and that's clearly 6. Okay, so I think we've covered these things. So natural law is instinctive, natural law is singular and universal, natural law includes both tables of the law, natural law is observable. Because natural law is observable, it is subject to scientific evaluation and description. That was Kohlberg's work. And natural law is attested to by our conscience. So this is the last part. Everyone has that inner voice that judges their actions. It could be an essential part of being self-aware. Okay? Animals, from what we can tell, don't have a conscience. If you were to look at animals from Kohlberg's moral development, you would say they're either 1 or 2. Okay? So you reward a dog, and it wants to do what it did to get the reward. That's 2. Or if you discipline a dog, inflict some type of pain, okay, then it wants to avoid the pain. So 1 or 2. But we don't know that we don't believe they got a conscience. So some have wondered, is our conscience then, because humans are self-aware, and is our conscience an integral part of that self-awareness? So then our conscience not only condemns, it also justifies. Sometimes people will think or use the word conscience in a very narrow sense that it shows them where they've done wrong. But our conscience works both ways. It not only condemns us, it also justifies us. And we'll say something like, I know I did the right thing. My conscience is clear. There, our conscience is justifying, it's defending our actions. So it works both ways, just like God's commandments do. I know I didn't steal, I did the right thing. So here, and that's what comes out in Romans 2. So they demonstrate that the work of the law that is written in their hearts, since their conscience also bears witness as their thoughts go back and forth, at times accusing or at times even defending them. So that both aspects of the law there. The conscience is a great ally for the evangelist. When the law is being proclaimed, the inner voice is confirming what is being said. And I just want to see okay, I don't want to get there yet. There are lots of different presentations for evangelism. Probably the most popular one in Ells and Wells circles is the Great Exchange. Okay? don't expect you to know what that is, but that's one. There are others. One method of presentation of the gospel that really focuses on this natural knowledge of God is the Way of the Master series. And you can search it, Way of the Master. Livingwaters.com is their main website. But the presentation of the gospel that they use is very much pointed at this law written on the heart. Okay? And Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort are the two main people involved in this ministry. They're not Lutheran. And they just go up to people on the street and will talk to people on the street. And they'll talk to them about whether they think they're a good person or not. And then they'll start asking questions like some of the commandments. Have you ever told a lie? Well, what do you call someone who tells a lie? I'm a liar, And they work them through this. And they're just using the commandments to connect with the person's heart, you might say. And you can do this when you're witnessing to someone. They can outwardly deny it, but inwardly, when you're talking about the commandments, when you're talking about lying and stealing and gossiping and, hatred, adultery, even in the heart, the voice inside of them, their conscience, saying what this person is saying is true. And I remember I was witnessing to a guy, and he was just denying it. No such thing as sin, so forth. And then finally he just melted. And because he kept denying it, and finally I said to him, there's a voice inside your heart right now that is telling you that what I am saying is true. And then he melted. He acknowledged, yep, I agree. Now, he didn't become a believer, but he had to acknowledge that there was a voice inside him that was agreeing with the commandments that I was sharing with him, or God's law. Okay? So, this is a great tool because, in a sense, the Christian evangelist has an ally on the inside of the unbeliever. That ally is God's law written on the heart. Sometimes we view evangelism in a very warlike manner. I'm the Christian, they're the unbeliever, they're the enemy. And we're going to battle, and I'm going to try and defeat you. And so it's a very aggressive way to view an evangelism exchange. Now, is there a battle going on? Yeah, but who's it between? It's not between, if I'm the evangelist, it's not between me and them. It's between God and Satan. God and that person's sinful nature. They're not my enemy. In fact, I'm to love them and care for them. So if I can change the way I view that person, I'm going to speak very differently. I'm going to speak in a totally different tone, use different words if I view that person as a foe, as an enemy, than I would if I'm loving them and wanting to win their soul for Christ, or for Christ to win the battle, so forth. Okay? So if you can view the individual not as your enemy, and then especially if you can see that on the inside of that person, there's an ally. So when I'm speaking God's law, there's someone on the inside that's my friend. And you can just picture that in your head, that you're talking to that inner voice inside of them, that law written on their heart. And you're trying to get that voice to speak up. because that voice inside is going to play a part in convincing this person that they're a sinner. It can't convince them that Christ is the Savior. That's only the gospel, and that's getting ahead to the next point. Okay, so viewing this ally, using the ally, and the beautiful thing of the way of the master, presentation of the law. I'm not so fond of their presentation of the gospel, though they have changed. Whether they know it or not, they've become more Lutheran in their presentation of law and gospel. But that'll be another topic. So, they get the person to label themselves. Okay? So have you ever told a lie? Yeah, I've told many lies. Well, what do you call someone that tells lies? A liar. Okay, so you're saying you're a liar. Yeah. Okay. So they've labeled themselves a liar. Have you ever stolen anything, taken anything that didn't belong to you, even if it's something small? Oh, yeah, I have. Well, what do you call someone that steals? A thief. Okay. So you're a thief. Yeah, I'm a thief. Okay. They'll often use adultery. So they'll say, have you ever looked at another person lustfully in a sexual way? And it's funny, yeah. That eventually will come out. Though I do remember one interview where the guy would not admit that he'd ever looked at anyone lustfully. Okay? Another one they use is, have you ever used God's name in vain? And, and then they'll supply that. Well, that's blasphemy, and God will not hold the blasphemer unaccountable, so forth. So they get this. Then they'll say, well, by your own words or your own account, you're a lying, thieving, blasphemous, adulterer at heart. And if God were to judge you according to his commandments, then how are you going to stand before him? Okay? So this is what they're doing, is they're getting the person to label themselves and to identify what they really are. It's a powerful use of the law written on the heart. Okay? And then you can tell the person about what God did so that they wouldn't have to be condemned for their sins, that he sent Jesus the Savior, so forth. Okay? So this whole idea of viewing the conscience as an ally for the evangelist. Then law is a constant guest in the heart. This is another aspect of it, and I think one of the other Sundays we touched on it briefly, but the whole idea that the law is with us all of the time. Okay? And the gospel is the foreign entity. The gospel is the thing outside of us that we need to hear again and again because the law is on our heart. In my experience, a lot of Christians come to church burdened with their sins. Okay? They know that they haven't been who they were supposed to be this last week. And so they come way down. Why is that? It's because the law's with them every day. The law's with them every moment of their day, if they're living their earthly lives. And it's constantly pointing out, you messed up there, you failed to be what you should be there. And that voice is there all the time. Okay? And so that's why in church we must make sure that the gospel predominates. Okay? So that this foreign knowledge is what is ringing in their ears when they leave the building. Okay? And so that they can take that out with them into their everyday lives. Okay? So this is a key issue, and I would say it's also one of the distinctions between Lutheranism and, I should say conservative Lutheranism and other denominations. The understanding that the gospel is foreign, the gospel needs to be proclaimed again and again and again, must predominate. Okay, done. Okay, so this is actually what I wanted to get to today, and I just want to keep an eye on time. So I have 23 minutes. Okay, Shroud of Turin. And I'll have the pictures of it. If you don't know what the Shroud of Turin, you'll learn it from here. But this is looking at what we know, or I should say, first of all, the Shroud of Turin is potentially the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. Okay, so here in Matthew 27, Joseph took the body, wrapped it. That's Joseph of Arimathea. Okay, not Joseph, Jesus' father. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a linen cloth, and laid it in his own new tomb that he had cut in the rock. He rolled a large stone over the tomb's entrance and left. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. So a single cloth is mentioned by Matthew, and notice it covers the whole body. Okay? And then it was witnessed by Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. Then in Mark, it says Joseph bought a linen cloth, took him down, and wrapped him in the linen cloth. He laid him in a tomb that had been cut out of rock, and he rolled the stone against the entrance of the tomb. So again, a linen cloth, one linen cloth. Joseph was rich and had the means to buy the expensive piece of linen. This large linen cloth would have been expensive. Okay? And so Joseph had the ability to buy it. So the linen cloths. Now we're going to plural. So in Luke, it says, this man went to Pilate, Joseph, and asked for Jesus' body. He took it down, wrapped it in a linen cloth, and placed it in a tomb that was cut out of rock when no one had been laid. Then later, Peter says, Peter got up and ran to the tomb, bending over to look in. He saw only the strips of linen cloth. He went home amazed at what had happened. So now we see plural, more than one cloth. John 19 says they took Jesus' body and bound it in linen strips along with spices in accordance with Jewish burial traditions. So Jewish burial tradition, do I have this here? Yeah, so Jewish burial customs include tying hands and feet together as seen in Jesus' raising of Lazarus from the dead. So when Lazarus comes out, he's got strips of linen on him. It says, take off the linen, untie the linen. Okay, so I need to keep moving because I would like to get through all of this. Then John 20, the two were running together, but the disciple outran Peter and got to the tomb first. Bending over, he saw the linen cloths lying there, yet he did not go in. Then Simon Peter, who was following him, arrived and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there. The cloth that had been on Jesus' head was not lying with the linen cloths, but was folded up in a separate place by himself. Then the other disciple, who had arrived at the tomb first, also entered. He saw and believed. So notice here, we've got the linen cloths lying there. The cloth that had been on Jesus' head was not lying with the linen cloth, still plural. It was folded up and separate. So we've got this big cloth going around the whole body. Then you've got linen strips tying the hands and the feet as per the Jewish custom. And then you've also got this face cloth that is separate from them. So it's these cloths that we're really going to be discussing today. So John saw these things. That's the point of that last one. John wrote what he saw. Here's the cloths. Here's where they were. So we know from the Gospels that there was one main linen cloth which covers Jesus' entire body. There were other linen cloths, including a head covering and strips which tied the hands and feet together. After the resurrection, the main cloth was left on the slab where the body of Jesus had been laid. The smaller linen cloth that had been the head covering had been removed when Jesus' body had been laid in the tomb. This cloth had been folded and laid to one side. So the thought is that when they took Jesus down from the cross, they covered his face with what we call the Cedarium. Okay? And they covered that, and then they took his body to the tomb, and on the tomb they laid him in the big linen cloth that went around. That, the face cloth, was taken away at that point and folded up and put on the side. Okay? then he would have been tied, so forth. What evidence is there that the shroud is genuine? Okay, so now we're getting to the shroud itself. So this is the big linen cloth. Okay, the world's leading expert on the shroud, a Jewish man named by the name of, I think it's Bari Schwartz, is convinced it's genuine. In addition, here is objective evidence that can be observed that it is genuine. So here's some. In 1898, Secondo Pia, the first person to photograph the shroud, was developing his negatives. He was surprised to see a positive image emerge on his film. A negative of a negative produces a positive image. So this part of photography is disappearing from our general knowledge, okay? Because we've all got digital phones. The photocell in the camera converts it to digital instead of onto a chemical film. Originally, photos were created by exposing chemicals on a film to light. And on the film, a negative was created. Then the photographer or the developer of the film would put it in chemicals, and it would turn that negative into a positive. Okay? Well, when Secondo was developing his film, what he realized was on his film was not a negative, but a positive. And that meant the cloth itself must have had a negative on it. Okay? A negative of a negative is a positive. Okay? So since it would have been impossible to fake a photographic negative on the shroud before any knowledge of photography existed, there can be no doubt that the shroud contains an actual photograph of a person. Okay? So the shroud, I think I've got this coming up. The earliest recorded evidence that we have for the shroud is in the 1200s. That's a little sketchy. By the 1300s, you've got firm recorded instances, record of the shroud. Okay? It's called the Shroud of Turin because it was in Turin. That's the town where it was rediscovered. So we have that data back to then. There was no photography in the 12 and 1300s. So how could have, even if you said it was created in the 1300s, how could have you put a photographic negative when photography isn't even in existence yet? Okay. 1978 scientific team that studied the shroud also stated this conclusion. So the negative is there, okay? It's been verified. There's a negative image on the Shroud of Turin. Okay? How did it get there? So even the skeptics admit that the image on the shroud goes back to at least the 13th century AD, long before photography existed. So even people that deny the authenticity of the shroud, they admit, yep, there's a negative there, and it was somehow created before photography was discovered or developed. So here's a picture of the shroud. On the left, this is what you would see with the naked eye. This is when you take a picture of it. Okay? So this is staining from being in contact with the body. This is something different. And the shroud, the image on the shroud is amazing because it's not just a photograph, it's also an X-ray, which we'll see. So here's artwork of the shroud, just showing you how it's laid. So the interesting, I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't want to do that. Okay, but you'll notice there's front and here's back because it's going all the way around. The shroud is historically accurate. The image on the shroud demonstrates that the individual was crucified with nails penetrating through the wrist, not the hand, In 1902, it was demonstrated that the flesh in the person's hands cannot bear the weight of necessary for crucifixion. So all the idea of the nails going through the hands, it was probably through the wrist. So that's what you see on the image on the shroud. The nails don't go through the hands, the marks are in the wrist. So there's a bigger image of the negative on the shroud. So the nails went through the wrist. This is a bad picture because it's so zoomed in, it's pixelated, but you can clearly see where the nail prints are. So then the energy came from inside the body. We know this to be so because there are no shadows on the photograph as would have happened with external lighting. So if you've ever dabbled with photography, one of the key things is lighting. Getting the shadows to fall where you want them to, and the artistic side of photography is controlling those shadows to portray certain things in the photograph. There's no shadows in the photograph on the shroud. Okay? So you've got no shadows, so the light source must be internal inside the body. You also have, and I think this is the next one, okay, another indication that the energy source came from inside the body is that the shroud contains the body image from both the front and back sides. External lighting could not make such a photograph. Okay? So the shroud is going all the way around the body, and the image is on both sides of the shroud. So clearly the light source has to be between the sheets. Otherwise, if you're taking it this way, you're not going to see an image on the back. Or if you're taking it from the back, you're not going to see an image on the front. Okay? So the image is on both sides of the body. So the light source must have been, or the energy source must have been from between the layers. And this guy has done quite a bit of research into it, and you can look that up if you wish. So the shroud has an X-ray image in addition to a photographic. Skeletal features can be observed. Once again, the energy source from the image must have come from inside the body. I've got a picture showing the hands particularly, which make the bone structure clear. Source of energy has no known scientific explanation, which strongly suggests that the energy that produced the image was supernatural. Okay. In the 70s, I think it was the 70s, where there was a scientific team that was looking at the shroud. The lead physicist said before he started examining the shroud, he expected to quickly look at the fibers, see that it was painted on there somehow, and be done with it. And he came away saying there is no known explanation for the image on the shroud. Okay? The image, the negative image, is only on the surface of the fibers. It doesn't even penetrate deep into the fibers. So it's not like you could have woven in a special fiber. Okay? It's only on the outside surface of the fiber. There's been different proposals that it was that like a fungus or some type of bacteria ate the bodily fluids or things like that on it. They've ruled out all of those. They have no idea how this thing was created. Just no known knowledge of it. So here, again, this is pixelated, but you can actually see the bones in the fingers. So it's not just surface photography, it's internal. You can see the bones. So pollen grains. So pollen grains on the shroud match plants that only existed in and around Jerusalem at the time of Jesus' death. Pollen they were trying to use it to discredit the shroud because there are pollen grains from different parts of the world, not just from Palestine. And, well, if you consider that the shroud was discovered in Turin, France, okay, so that thing has obviously traveled. Okay. If it is authentic, then there should be pollen grains from Palestine, but because it's traveled, there's probably pollen grains from others. There is a tradition that the shroud was carried in to the church in Constantinople surrounded with flowers. That they would actually carry the shroud in and it would be draped with flowers. If that tradition is correct, it would help explain why there are other pollen grains on there. But this is particularly focusing on the pollen that is in the shroud that is only found in Palestine. Okay? So these plants are known to bloom in the spring, the time of Jesus' crucifixion. These plants as a group, and several of them individually, are known to exist nowhere else in the world other than Palestine. One of these many plants, I'm not going to butcher that name for you, grows only in Israel, Jordan, and the Sinai. Okay? So that's the only places. And that there's the source of that information. Okay, and there's some of the pollen grains. So we're moving on. I come back to this pollen though. So written records of the Cedarium. So that's the face cloth. Go back to 1st century to Jerusalem. So the Cedarium has a much better written record than the shroud does. Scientific study of these two linen cloths has revealed that they are stained with the same blood type, AB, and we would say AB negative. Okay? And stains have the same shapes and are in the same locations on the cloth. So if you take the Cedarium or the shroud and overlay them, the patterns are the same. Now, I believe the Cedarium has more blood stains on it. And if it's true that that was the cloth first laid on Christ, it would be natural that that would have more blood stains. Okay? But when you lay them over, you can see, wow, perfect overlay. Same type of blood. And by the way, AB negative is a rarer type of blood, but it appears Jews of Jesus' time that there was a higher occurrence of AB negative or AB blood in the Jews of that time. So same type, same pattern. These two linen cloths covered the same body. That's the logical conclusion. There is no image on the Cedarium head covering. So there's no photographic or X-ray image on the Cedarium. It's only on the shroud. Okay, but we don't believe it was on Christ when he rose from the dead. So many details we know about the shroud match the details given in the gospel. These details include there being one main cloth, the Cedarium having been removed from the body, the linen cloth having been very expensive, there was no spices on the cloth, the body having been crowned with thorns, the person having been flogged, pierced, so forth. I thought I had pictures in here of the crown of thorns. Pollen grains. Okay, here it is. I thought it was earlier, supposed to be earlier. So from the shroud we know the crown of thorns took the shape of a cap, not a laurel wreath. These vines, and that's, you can see all of the pinpricks in the head on the shroud, okay? So they believe it was a cap, more along the signs like this. And this is did I say that? The vine of thorns. So this is identified in the pollen grains, this plant with this unique thorn structure. So when it says they wove a crown, it was probably more like this than the laurel wreath that we often picture. Okay? And when you think about it, there are different types of crowns. You can have a circlet, but most crowns are more like a hat. And this would be more like what we would call a hat, but a crown of thorns. And I know I've only got about a minute left. So the blood type and pattern of bloodstains, they all match. For this reason, it appears that we have two independent and complementary bodies of historical records that confirm the authenticity of the shroud. Go on to that. Bruise marks, so there's evidence for scourging out on the face. Here's a picture of the back. So you can see that. So we know this person was crucified. They've been pierced in their hands and their feet. They've been scourged. You can see that from the marks on the back. Crown of thorns. And the crown of thorns is unique. We don't have any other record in history of someone being crucified having a crown of thorns. There's also evidence of the stab in the side, the lance wound. And there's no decomposition. That's another startling fact. There's no decomposition. So obviously this linen cloth was not on this body very long, because there would be evidence of decomposition of the body. None. Okay? Absolutely none. Matches David's prophecy, you will not let your favored one see decay. Very last thing. Then here's another fascinating thing. Magnification of the coins. There's coins on the eyes. Okay? And this will be the last point. They date to 31 AD, and we know that date specifically because there's a misspelling on the coins. Okay? So the misspelling actually lets us pinpoint exactly when those coins, 31 AD, right in that area. And here's the coin. And we can't see it on this picture, but you can see the coins on the eyes. So there is no credible evidence that suggests the shroud is anything other than the burial cloth of Christ. Okay? If you search online, you will find that they carbon dated it. Okay? They carbon dated it by taking small piece from the shroud, so forth. Okay? But they now know that they took the sample from a patch that was sewn into the cloth later. The cathedral in Turin burned down, and the shroud was in a chest, and molten silver from the fire burned through the chest and through the cloth. It was mended. They took the carbon dating sample from the mended part. Since then, no one has carbon dated it, which to me is a little bit surprising, because now they know we took it from a patch. Why haven't they bothered to carbon date the cloth that they know is original? I would assume it's because they know what the results are going to be. So we've got coins dating at 1st century. There's that section on carbon dating. And I think we're almost done. I think we're done. Yep. Okay, so the shroud is fascinating. I can't tell you, categorically, this is the burial cloth of Christ. But boy, there's a lot of things about it that should make you think. If it is the burial cloth of Christ, we shouldn't be surprised that the church would keep it and try and preserve it. So, fascinating thing. Do your own research into it. So we don't have Bible study next week or the week after. When we start up in the new year, we're going to be looking at the book of Revelation. If you have any questions about the material that we've covered so far, don't hesitate to let me know. I'll be happy to try and answer anything I can. Let's close with the singing of the doxology. Have a great day, everyone.